everybody. Welcome to Seriously Read a Book. My name is John. My daughter Rose is here today with us. Want to say hi, Rose?
Hi.
And today we are going to be reading Mr. Jack is a Maniac, my Weirder School book number 10 by Dan Gutman, pictures by Jim Palo. Chapter 1, The H Word. My name is AJ, and I hate hate. Let me explain. It was a really nice day, so Dr. Brad, the school counselor, took our class out to the playground to talk. We sat in a circle near the monkey bars. Dr. Brad was telling us how kids need to be nicer to each other. So here's a picture of Dr. Brad hanging out with the kids. Looks like everybody's sitting in the sand next to the monkey bars. Hate is not a nice word, Dr. Brad told us. Then there's a little asterisk, a little footnote. So if you run into a footnote, usually you go down to the bottom of the page. It says, Dr. Brad talks funny. If you read this book out loud, make him sound like a crazy German mad scientist. We should try to be kind and tolerant of other people, even if we don't like them so much. The world would be a better place if there was less hate. No? So try not to use that word. I hate hate, I said. I can't think of anything I hate more than hate, said Ryan, who will eat anything, even stuff that isn't food. I hate people who hate people, said Michael, who never ties his shoes. Everybody agreed that they hated hate. Well, everybody except Andrea Young, this annoying girl with curly brown hair. If we shouldn't hate things, Andrea said, then we shouldn't hate hate, right? Huh? Yeah, we should like hate, said her crybaby friend Emily, who agrees with everything Andrea says. But it would be wrong to like hate, said Neil, who we call the nude kid even though he wears clothes. I hate hate, but I hate hating hate too, said Alexia, this girl who rides a skateboard everywhere. I thought my head was gonna explode. I hate when that happens. Nobody hates hate more than I hate hate, said Ryan. I hate hate more than you hate hate, said Michael. You do not, I do too. Then they went back and forth like that for a while. Hate, 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 hate. Everybody was saying, stop saying hate! Dr. Brad shouted. But you just said it, I told him. Dr. Brad closed his eyes and he rubbed his forehead with his fingers. Did you ever notice that only grown-ups rub their forehead with their fingers? Kids never do that. I guess when you grow up, your forehead gets itchy. Grown-ups are constantly rubbing their foreheads with their fingers. The point is, said Dr. Brad, we should try to use the H word less and love each other more. Everybody started giggling and poking each other with their elbows because Dr. Brad, he said the L word. Anytime somebody says love, you should start giggling and poking the person next to you with your elbow. That's the first rule of being a kid. You know what I mean, Dr. Brad said. If you have a disagreement with someone, you should try to talk it out instead of fighting about it all the time. Dr. Brad got up and we all walked near the woods at the end of the playground. We're not supposed to play back there. Our principal, Mr. Klutz, once told us that he saw a big black bear out there one day. He was probably just kidding, but I stay away from the back of the playground anyway because I don't want to get attacked by a big black bear. That is when the most amazing thing in the history of the world happened. There was a loud noise in the trees. We all turned around and you'll never believe in a million hundred years what came roaring out of the woods. No, it was not a big black bear. Ha 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 ha! You thought it was a big black bear, didn't you? Well, na boo-boo on you, because it wasn't. It was a big black motorcycle! A big black loud motorcycle, and it was coming straight at us. There's a picture of Dr. Brad and some kids walking before they hear the motorcycle sound. It was coming straight at us. Eek! Shouted all the girls. Run for your life! Shouted Neil, the nude kid. Ooh, here it comes. Motorcycle coming out of the woods.
That costume kind of looks like Elvis's.
It does. It looks a little bit like Elvis. Or there was a guy who used to, who's called Evil Knievel. He used to try to jump over trucks and through flames and things. The big black motorcycle skidded to a stop right next to Dr. Brad. After the dust cleared, the guy riding the motorcycle took off his helmet. He had deep blue eyes and long dark hair. He said only one word. Yo. Chapter 2, Mr. Jack is cool. Is yo even a word? I know that yo-yo is a word. I saw this guy at a toy store once who did yo-yo tricks. He could fling the thing above his head, between his legs, and all over the place. Yo-yos are cool. Where was I? Oh yeah, it doesn't matter if yo is a word or not, because the motorcycle guy said it, and if you say it, I guess it must be a word. Who's he? Everybody was asking. He's cool, said Neil the nude kid. He looks like a movie star, said Alexia. He's handsome, said Andrea. He's dreamy, said Emily. The motorcycle guy turned off his motorcycle. He was wearing leather pants, leather shoes, a leather belt, and a leather jacket.
Yeah, Elvis.
Yeah, Elvis! That guy must really like leather. I wondered how many cows had to die to make his clothes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a comb. Then he started combing his hair in slow motion. Doing anything in slow motion is cool. I saw this TV show once where they dropped watermelons out of a 10-story building and you could see them hit the ground and explode in slow motion. That was cool. Excuse me, sir, said Dr. Brad. May I ask who you are and what you are doing on school property? The motorcycle guy didn't say anything for a long time. He just stared at Dr. Brad with his deep blue eyes. My name is Mr. Jack, he finally said. You can call me Mr. Jack. But your name is Mr. Jack, said Ryan. I know, said Mr. Jack. That's why you should call me Mr. Jack. Don't you want us to call you something instead of Mr. Jack? Asked Michael. No. Why? Asked Mr. Jack. When people say you can call me, that usually means we should call them something different from their regular name. I told him. Not this time, said Mr. Jack. That guy is weird. The recess bell rang and kids came pouring out of the school. Oh, another asterisk. Another little asterisk, which means joop, 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 joop. Go down to the footer where you have a footnote. Well, not really. You pour stuff out of a pitcher, not out of a school.
True.
True. That's what you pour stuff out of. So they must have seen the motorcycle because a whole bunch of them came running over and gathered around Mr. Jack. So did some of the teachers. Well, hello, said our gym teacher, Miss Small. She was all giggly and she started fussing with her hair. Hi there, stranger, said Miss Holly, our Spanish teacher. She was blushing and fanning herself with her hand. New in town? Asked Ms. Hannah, our art teacher. Oh, here is a picture of all of the lady teachers who are pretty glad that Mr. Jack is around. They're sort of falling all over themselves and giggling a lot. She pulled a little mirror out of her pocket and started putting makeup on her face. All of the lady teachers were giggling and blushing and fussing with their hair and fanning themselves and looking in little mirrors. Ladies always do that stuff when they're in love. Nobody knows why. Miss Small looked like she was gonna faint. What's your name, sugar? Asked Ms. Laney, our speech teacher. Hello, ladies. My name is Mr. Jack. You can call me Mr. Jack. Well, giggled Miss Holly, you can call me available. Dr. Brad pushed his way to the front so he could talk to Mr. Jack. I'm sorry, sir, but what you're doing is called trespassing, said Dr. Brad. This is school property. You need to leave. Oh, yeah? Said Mr. Jack. Who's gonna make me? Ooh, we all said. Anytime somebody says, who's gonna make me, you have to say, ooh. Ooh. That's the first rule of being a kid. I suppose I'm going to make you, said Dr. Brad. Oh yeah? Said Mr. Jack. You and what army? Ooh! Anytime somebody says you and what army, you have to say, ooh! That's the second rule of being a kid. I'm scared, said Emily, who's scared of everything. Dr. Brad was looking at Mr. Jack. Mr. Jack was looking at Dr. Brad. We were all looking at Dr. Brad and Mr. Jack, while the girls were pretty much just looking at Mr. Jack. At that moment, the back door of the school opened and a bunch of male teachers came out. Mr. Mackey, Mr. Granite, Mr. Loring, Mr. Docker, Even Mr. Louis, our school crossing guard, and Mr. Tony, the after-school program director, came out. They all ran over and made a circle around Mr. Jack. "This army," said Dr. Brad. Ooh. That's right, Chapter 3, Weapons of Mass Destruction. "Who is this guy?" asked Mr. Mackey, our reading specialist. "His name is Mr. Jack," I said, "but you can call him Mr. Jack." "Okay, Mr. Jack," said our science teacher, Mr. Docker. "This is school property. You can't stay here. We have you outnumbered. If you won't leave on your own, we're gonna have to make you leave." "Oh, let him stay," said Miss Holly. "He's cute." "Yeah," said all the lady teachers. "He's cute." Then they all started giggling. "This is gonna be cool," Ryan whispered to me. "Now this is exactly the kind of situation I was telling you children about," said Dr. Brad. "We are having a little disagreement here. When mature adults have disagreements, the best way to settle them is to have an open and honest discussion instead of fight." But Dr. Brad didn't get a chance to finish his sentence. At that moment, Mr. Jack picked him up and held him in the air. That is what that looked like. It looks a little bit like Elvis in white leather outfit holding a crazy German man over his head.
And yeah.
With a monocle.
Yeah, Mr. Jack is the complete opposite of what the crazy German teacher was talking about, because
Totally.
he said, "We settle it out with words." Hi-ya!
It's true. Oh, you're right. And the next word is "yeah!" screamed Mr. Jack. Then he threw Dr. Brad across the playground. "Wow!" we all said, which is mom upside down. Dr. Brad landed in the bushes. It was cool. I had no idea you could throw another person so far. Mr. Jack jumped into a karate pose. "I must warn the rest of you fellas," he said, "these hands are dangerous tools. In fact, I had to have them registered with the government as weapons of mass destruction." Mr. Jack's hands looked just like regular hands to me, but what do I know about karate? "We're not afraid," said Mr. Tony. "Come on, boys, let's take him." With that, Mr. Tony charged at Mr. Jack. "Yeah!" screamed Mr. Jack. He spun around fast, grabbed Mr. Tony's arms, gave him a kick in the butt, and sent him tumbling to the ground. "I don't approve of violence on school property," said Andrea. "What do you have against violins?" I asked her. "Not violins, Arlo," Andrea shouted at me. "Violence!" Oh, that's different. Mr. Tony got up, and the other male teachers came after Mr. Jack, one at a time. Mr. Granite jumped on Mr. Jack. Mr. Jack flipped him sideways. Mr. Granite was flat on his back. Mr. Louis tried to grab Mr. Jack's legs. Mr. Jack jumped up and landed on Mr. Louis. "Yeah!" screamed Mr. Jack. "Hide your eyes, Emily," Andrea said. "This kind of behavior is definitely not appropriate for children." Mr. Mackey and Mr. Loring charged at Mr. Jack, but Mr. Jack grabbed both of them at the same time and bonked their heads together. "Yeah!" screamed Mr. Jack. "Oof!" grunted Mr. Loring as he hit the ground with a thud.
Ooh.
One by one, Mr. Jack kicked all of their butts. It was like watching professional wrestling on TV, but without the TV. Oh, and here's a picture of Mr. Jack beating up lots of people and lots of dreamy-eyed school teachers looking at Mr. Jack like he's the best thing ever, while he is very violent with the male teachers. And the kids are having a good time too. All the lady teachers were giggling and blushing and fussing with their hair and fanning themselves and looking at their faces in little mirrors. All the male teachers were sprawled on the ground, moaning and groaning. It was hilarious. "I guess you fellas will think twice before messing with Mr. Jack again," said Mr. Jack. Then he started combing his hair. "How do I look?" he asked. "Does anybody want my autograph?" Chapter 4, Step Outside. You'll never believe in 1,100,000 years who came running out of the school at that moment.
Principal Klutz.
Oh! It was Mr. Klutz! Our principal. Have we read this before?
No.
Good guess, Rose. He's like the president of the world. Mr. Klutz has no hair at all. I mean, none. They should put a solar panel on his head to generate electricity.
Ow.
What's going on out here? Mr. Klutz demanded. Nobody said a word. Everybody stepped out of the way. Mr. Jack and Mr. Klutz were standing there, staring at each other. You could hear a pin drop. Footnote. That is if anybody had a pin and dropped it. This playground ain't big enough for both of us, partner, said Mr. Jack. I reckon it ain't, partner, said Mr. Klutz. Why were they talking like it was the Wild West? This was weird. I don't like the sound of this, Andrea said. Me either, said Emily. I'm going to have to ask you to step outside, sir, Mr. Klutz said. We're already outside, Mr. Jack replied. Oh, yeah. Mr. Jack turned to face us. Should I beat this guy up too? He asked. Yeah! Shouted all the boys. Look at that. There they are. They're facing off. Mr. Klutz and Mr. Jack.
Mr. Klutz is like, what's about to happen to me?
Totally. No! Shouted all the girls. Mr. Jack took 2 quick steps forward and dove at Mr. Klutz's legs, knocking him down. Then he picked up Mr. Klutz and raised him high over his head. Help! Mr. Klutz shouted. Put me down! Ee-yaw! Screamed Mr. Jack. Mr. Jack spun around a few times, then he dropped Mr. Klutz on the ground and sat on him, so he couldn't get up.
This is violent.
This is super violent. You should have been there. It was amazing. What happened next was even more amazing. Mr. Jack got up and helped Mr. Klutz to his feet. They shook hands and hugged each other.
Wait. Oh!
Then all the male teachers came over to shake hands with Mr. Jack, so did all the lady teachers. Then all the teachers got in a line and took a bow like they were in a play or something. A few kids started clapping their hands and the rest of us broke out into applause. Thank you, said Dr. Brad. You all did a wonderful job. Wait a minute, I shouted. You mean to say that wasn't a real fight? No, of course not, Dr. Brad replied. At elementary school, we don't fight. What are you thinking, Rose?
They did an example to teach the kids a lesson that you should never do that. Or else that would happen.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah. I think that you're onto something. What do you guys think? Do you think that that's what's going on? Here we go. No, of course not, Dr. Brad replied. At elementary school, we don't fight. We settle our differences with words, not with fists. I felt that you kids should learn a few basic self-defense moves in case of an emergency, Mr. Klutz told us. It's a dangerous world out there, and blah 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 blah, blah 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 blah, everyone needs to blah 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 blah. That's why I hired Mr. Jack to spend the rest of the day with us. Hooray! We all shouted. Any questions? Asked Mr. Jack. You're really good at karate, said Michael. Do you have a black belt? Let me put it this way, said Mr. Jack. I do have a belt, and it's black. Wow! He has a black belt! I shouted. I always wanted to take karate classes, but my parents said I had to wait until I was in 4th grade. Who wants to be door closer for the day? Asked Mr. Klutz as we all walked back inside the school. Me, I do, we all shouted. Everybody wanted to be door closer for the day. That's an important job because you have to be sure to close the door. If the door closer for the day doesn't close the door, a wild animal might wander into the school. So being a door closer is way more important than being like line leader or snack passer outer. I always wanted to be door closer for the day, but Mr. Klutz never picks me. He always picks one of the other kids. AJ, you are door closer for the day, Mr. Klutz said. Yes, I rule. After I closed the door, I ran up ahead so I could talk to Mr. Jack. Are you going to teach us how to beat people up? I asked him. Up, down, and sideways, baby, he replied.
Oh, okay.
This was gonna be cool. Cool! So that was part 1 of Mr. Jack is a Maniac, chapters 1 through 4 by Dan Gutman, pictures by Jim Palo. Thanks for joining us. Want to say bye, Rose?
Bye.
Bye, y'all. We'll catch you next time.